thousands of homes. A man loved a woman, a child it was born. It learned how to hurt, and it learned how to cry, like humans do.
Hi, and welcome to the 197th Tommy Rocket Show. As you know, we're here today with Peter Phipps, journalism instructor at URI, and our special guest, Brendon Doherty. Peter, tell us what we've got in store for our audience today.
We're going to talk about criminals and family and a long time in Rhode Island. Most people, I'm sure, know who you are, Brendon, but
For those who don't.
28 years in the state police. You ran for Congress. You were the superintendent of the state police for almost 5 years. And you came out with a book, which is very interesting, and was probably the basis for most of my questions today. But you grew up in Taunton, and the thing I learned that was most interesting was the story of your two grandfathers. They were almost polar opposites, right?
Right, yeah. So I was born in Taunton, grew up in Attleboro, and there was a reason for that. My dad was a dental surgeon, and his brother was, and they were the only two dental surgeons in town. So my father thought that it would be best he moved to Attleboro on the Rhode Island line. That's what eventually brought me hanging around with my friends from Rhode Island and Pawtucket in that area. But yeah, it was. Taunton was, a different city. It was an Irish enclave, and coming over into Attleboro was, as a young boy, was a new experience. But it wasn't until later that I was introduced to Grundy's Gym. That
As a teenager,
Yeah.
that I came to learn a lot about a different.
And that was part of your family. Both the cop and the criminal were part of your family.
Yes, yeah. So to answer that question about my two grandfathers, they were both great men. But it wasn't until later in life that I learned that my grandfather, Tom Doherty, on my father's side, obviously, he spent some considerable prison time during Prohibition. And when I heard that, I mean, I was already in the state police when I learned that my grandfather had done prison time. And the interesting dichotomy there was that my other grandfather, Jack Flynn, who was very popular in town. They were both very popular in town.
For different reasons.
In Taunton, Old Taunton, yeah, for different reasons. Jack Flynn was the head of detectives in Taunton, and Tom Doherty was, he went to prison for
the Volstead Act.
For the Volstead Act, yeah.
Yes,
so
he sold something that was untaxed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But what goes along with that? There was a lot of gambling operations back then and whatnot. But I need to say, Tom Doherty was the nicest gentleman, one of the nicest gentlemen I've ever met in my life, and so was my other grandfather. But I never remember them ever being in the same room together.
And you never had Thanksgiving with either ends of the table or anything like that?
Yeah, I didn't put that together until later. I always wondered, like, well, my Grandpa Flynn is here, or Grandpa Doherty said, where's the other one? And it was, someone would just say, oh, he couldn't make it. And I'm just assuming years later that they probably didn't like to hang out together.
Yeah. But they may have run into each other on the street, no?
May have, yes.
Yeah. Now, you brought up the gym.
how did you come to go there?
Well, boxing was popular in my family. My father was into boxing, and he was a big Rocky Marciano fan, and used to go to watch Rocky train in Brockton. And so, because of that, and the stories in the house about the boxers from the Taunton area, that was big when my father was growing up. I just had an interest in it, and then we made a ring in the backyard, and we settled some of the neighborhood issues right in the backyard. And then it was time for me to bring it to another level, because nobody really wanted to come into the backyard with my brother and I.
Yeah.
So I went to Grundy's Gym. I was friendly with the Grundy family. Bob Grundy owned a boxing gym in Central Falls, and it was a real gym. I mean, this was like out of a movie. Still is today. I went
Like
by
a Rocky movie.
Like the Rocky movie, yeah, The Eye of the Tiger. There were some tough fighters in there, and I learned the hard way that I wasn't as tough as I thought I was in the backyard. I went from the backyard to a real boxing gym.
But you learned some lessons about boundaries in your life between
Sure.
certain kind of characters and how you
Sure.
act around those characters. So
Yeah.
tell the story about the time you didn't have much money, your car broke down.
Yeah, sure. So, but I need to just qualify that, because my father was always about being a gentleman, never pick a fight, and be courteous to people. And I came into this environment, and most of these guys had been, a lot of these guys had been to jail, and some of them were on their way to jail. We went in there, myself and Peter Grundy, we had our own little idea of becoming pro fighters, although my father wouldn't let me continue, and his father wouldn't let him. Peter Grundy was a two-time Golden Gloves champion, ready to turn pro. I was ready. I could have turned pro, and they just didn't
Right.
see it that way. But
The lessons.
there are many lessons in there, and so the actually, I just lost my train of thought.
We were talking about that car and the lessons
Yeah,
you learned from
okay.
because it tells the story pretty clearly.
It does, and you learn lessons of life in a gym like this. Now, the one that you're referring to is there was a gentleman who took a liking to me, and he was the former light heavyweight champion of New England, and he was a tough guy, and a real tough guy, and his name was Dickie Quattrochi. They called him Dickie Gambino. His fight name was Dickie Gambino.
But he came from the Quattrochi political family, the whole family in Rhode Island.
Well,
right?
yeah, there's a large Quattrochi family
Yeah.
in Providence. But
Anyway.
he was always nice to me. I didn't know anything about the organized crime ties during that period of time, but he.
You were a teenager then.
I was 18, 17, 18.
Yeah.
But long story short, I had brought my car to be fixed, and my car had just broken down. My dad was very sick at the time, and I wasn't going to give him the bill. I made the mistake of pulling into an auto body place, auto repair place, and just asked him, make some noise. Could you just fix it up nice? And I didn't ask him, give me a call if it's over $50. Bear in mind, this is back in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And the bill came, I couldn't get my car until I paid $300. Yeah. $300 to me was like, it would be like paying a $10,000 car bill today for me. So Dickie Gambino heard that, and he pulled me over and he said, "Where's your car?" And I said, "Well, it's at such and such a car place, and the guy won't let me have my car back until I pay $300. And he gave me a lesson. He said, in the interest of time, I won't tell you everything he said, but he basically told me you can't just drop cars off. You have to have it repaired. You have to know somebody. Whatever you do in life, you need to know somebody that you have a contact at that place." So I'm listening to these lessons, and then he said, "Now I'm going to change up here," because he was already retired, but he used to come down and hit the bag, and everyone feared the guy. So he said, "I'm going to give you a ride, and we're going to go get your car."
And basically said, "I'm going to take care of it for you." Right?
Yeah, I'm going to take care of it. We're going to get your car. So I didn't know what that meant. I was in college at the time. I was commuting to college. I needed my car for my commute, and my dad was sick, and Bob Grundy heard that, and he said, No, Dickie, I've got the car. I've got Brendon's car. It's all set. I've got it all paid for. It's all set." And I was confused because I didn't tell Bob Grundy the story. And he said, "Okay, you're all set? Yeah, everything's all set." And he pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, you can't go for rides with just anybody in here. Dickie's a nice guy. I like Dickie. But he came up the hard way. You don't know how that ride would have ended up. Because if the guy with the car gave him a hard time, this would not have ended well. And you have an interest in law enforcement. You need to stay away from guys."
Right, and the other side of that is, if it went real well, then you would have owed a favor.
Right, exactly.
He acted like your caring uncle.
He did, but Bob Grundy was like an uncle.
But he
to me,
knew.
so he gave me the real
Yeah.
scoop.
Yeah.
And,
So
I learned from that. Because here I am. I had an interest in law enforcement, and I wasn't afraid of anybody. But I'm in the lion's den. I'm in a gym where there's some guys that the Grundys were wonderful people, but they allowed folks to come into that gym. I mean, someone could have taken the bus from prison and come into the gym, and Bob would open the gym up because he believed in idle time as a devil's workshop. And he wanted kids from a tough street environment to be able to come to the gym, fight, get in shape, and have that mutual respect. Because there's many guys I fought in the gym that, you know, they had a tough life. I mean, and I grew up in different circumstances in an environment that I did, and may have gone to prison for something. But when we were fighting, we had a mutual respect, and afterwards we'd shake hands, and those are some of the lessons from that gym.
But you also learned something about a culture that you would have a professional engagement with as you got to the state police and moved along, right?
I listened and I learned, and years later when I get into the state police, and I always had an interest in the wise guys. I knew more than most because I was in that environment.
Right. Now, a lot of the stuff, as I said earlier, comes from your book, It's Just the Way It Was, which you wrote, what, 4 years ago or something?
About 4 years ago, yeah.
And it tells some of the stories, many of the stories we're going to talk about dealing with organized crime. But it's the title that is still, I still come back to. It's not the title on all the mob books you're going to see out there. So
no.
It's Just the Way It Was is your title.
That was basically from, I'd be in, at a house party or out at a restaurant, and someone I'd bump into would say, hey, do you remember, did you ever have any dealings with so-and-so? Sure, and they'd tell the story, and some people were just fascinated by those stories, and they'd look at you, that really happened? I said, it's just the way it was. I'd always end it with the same thing, it just happened. It's just the way it was back then.
Yeah.
So, and some of these, so someone had told me, you got to write these stories down because these are names in Rhode Island that people will forget someday. They'll never remember these people. Right. And you got to memorialize it and document it. And every time a story would come up, some of it sounds like it's fabricated, but it's just the way it was.
And then you took that journal and you got together with Joe Broadmeadow and we got the book.
Right.
And it's out there on Amazon right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, 12 minutes has just flown by, so I want to remind everybody to stay tuned for the second segment of the Tommy Rocket Show, and we'll be right back.
Young, who got some good minutes in the first half, hits the jumper. Tiffany Young, a junior from Hillsboro, Alabama, has 4. Young, 17, would have got it. And Tiffany Young with a sensational performance.
All right.
Hi, and welcome back, Peter, Brendon Doherty. Where have we left off in our picking up here?
Well, Brendon's come of age, and he's got an application into the state police.
How old were you at that point?
I was 21 when I 20 when I put the application in, but I was accepted to the academy when I was 21. I was the second youngest in my class. Colonel Stone took a liking to me from the boxing stories, and he knew that I fought in exhibitions in the area, and I was a sparring partner for a fellow who had just fought George Foreman and Jerry Cooney, and so he liked those stories.
But he was a boxing fan.
He was a boxing fan. He boxed when he was a kid, and I was the same size as Colonel Stone, so I don't know.
Is he tall like you?
Yes, yeah.
But he was skinny, right?
He was a big man.
Was he? Yeah. So. But they knew about Grundy's Gym, and they knew who hung out there, and they were interested in knowing how you would handle a series of questions about that.
Yes.
Right?
So in my interview for the state police, they doubled down on me and asked me a lot of questions about my relationship in that gym, and I made it very clear. I went to that gym to work out, to stay in shape, and at the time I wanted to be a professional fighter, but my dad wouldn't let me. Good thing. I'm glad he talked me out of that. It's a terrible. Not terrible, but it's a tough life for those guys. I know a lot of pro fighters, and a lot of them.
You get your brains beat out.
Yeah, it's a tough sport. A lot of disappointments for those guys.
Now, was Stone there at the interview, or his?
No, he was not at the interview, but that gets reported right away to him. And I guess I passed the test.
But they had you stripped down because they wanted to see if you had tattoos or something?
Well, back then, everyone had to, and it's just the way it was.
But so you're vulnerable, and then they're asking these questions about the gym and stuff.
Yeah, and they wanted to see what type of condition you're in or whatever. And
so
anyways, I must have passed the test because they would ask me questions about, do you know so-and-so? Yes, I do. How do you know him? No, tell him he's a guy in the gym, and I got to know them, but I don't hang around with them. I've never seen them outside of the gym. And they asked about 4 or 5 people like that, and it was the same answer every time. Once I got a little bit more educated on the Rhode Island mob and who's who, I realized some of these guys in the gym are mobsters, and I would hear them. It was often you'd hear them talking about, loan sharking or the vig on a game, or so and so didn't pay. We're going to pay him a visit. And I would overhear this stuff, but I'm in the same gym. I wasn't going to run out of my gym because I'm afraid of anything, because I wasn't afraid of them. So if anyone's going to leave, they're going to have to leave. So the Stone, I think, was impressed by that piece.
I'm guessing you were the youngest person in the gym when all this was going on.
No, there were a few younger guys. I was the youngest in the academy, but there were a few younger guys in the gym, some Golden Gloves fighters and young kids that would come in. But most of the wise guys, I got to know who they were, and it was an education for me. I became educated on that world in that gym.
Now, you said your father was a detective, right?
No, my grandfather was.
Your grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you first got into the state police, you weren't working organized crime. You were in the detective unit, right?
Right.
So there was one. You made one case, and you got yourself a car, and you got an office, and you got into you had a breakthrough, and you got off the street and into the detective unit, right?
Organized crime unit.
Yeah.
We called the intelligence unit.
So how did that happen? What was that all about?
Well, I had made some substantial arrests, one for armed robbery, and other information that led to.
Oh, you were in the detective unit then?
No, this was when I was in uniform. I still had an interest in organized crime, and I still was interested in cultivating informants.
So you were showing initiative as far as they were concerned, and you got results.
Colonel Stone used to say, "You're only as good as your information that you develop." So I would cultivate informants and take that information, pass it on, and with 6 years on, Colonel Stone promoted me to the intelligence unit, to the organized crime unit.
Right. So that puts you. The book has many instances of you show up in Federal Hill. You show up at places in Federal Hill.
Yeah, we'd conduct surveillances. Some of it would be overt. You'd drive by, and Raymond Patriarca Sr. had already died by the time I got into the intelligence unit. But, if I saw Junior Patriarca or any of his right-hand men,
henchmen.
We would make it known that we can see you, and we put you guys together, or we put them together on a surveillance.
So you never saw that famous scene that I've never seen, obviously, of Raymond sitting out in that lawn chair in front of Coin-O-Matic?
Not while I was working, but when I was going to college, I would take the Atwells Avenue exit, and Raymond would always be sitting out there with usually if it was a nice day out, he'd have a all white shirt, short sleeve shirt.
Yeah, no sleeves, right?
No sleeve. No, short sleeve.
Short
sleeve shirt.
Yeah.
Raymond Sr.
Smoking a cigar or no?
He was smoking a cigar, or sometimes just a cigarette, and he'd wave to people as they went by.
Yeah, and I've run into Rhode Islanders, and maybe it's just something as a former newsman that you sort of laugh about, but a lot of Rhode Islanders seem to be proud of the fact that the mafia in New England was run in Federal Hill by a Rhode Islander.
It's kind of a weird pride, isn't it?
It is, but what do you make of that?
Danger, that's why.
Well, I think they were. Rhode Island's always being pushed around by Boston or something. Was that
something like that? I don't know, because
you ran into yourself.
It didn't help our business community. Like if a company from out of state wanted to move here, it seemed to come up a lot that, wait a minute, do we want to move there? That's a mob state, and
right.
And I'm proud to have been part of dismantling that.
Right.
During that era, but I would hear that a lot, and they would justify it and say, well, the streets were safer then.
Yes, they always say that.
Well, maybe they were, like right in front of Raymond's office, but
right. So one of the biggest case in Rhode Island actually was an impeachment of the Supreme Court Justice Bevilacqua.
Right.
And
there was
Colonel Stone put you on that case, and the big thing was turning that witness, Moon DiOrio, right?
Yes, I didn't turn Moon, but I was involved in his protection, and I had to bring him in that day for his testimony.
So let's bring it back a little bit. What was Colonel Stone's point about Bevilacqua? What was the problem with the Chief Justice?
Well, he was alleged to have organized crime ties, and it's very difficult. I mean, we could talk about this for 3 hours. he grew up in a section
Silver Lake.
in Silver Lake where, let me just qualify this in fairness to the Chief Justice. He lived on Pocasset Avenue. His next door neighbor might have been a barber. The other next door neighbor could have been a doctor. Across the street is a mobster, and the other side is a priest. I mean, it's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm. Just the way it was.
And so he became the Speaker of the House. People forget how his career went. He was a neighborhood attorney, became the Speaker of the House, had 2 sons. One was a prominent defense attorney who later went to prison, and another was a prominent defense attorney too, who became the head of the Senate. Nice guy, John Bevilacqua. And the father became the Supreme Court Chief Justice. So he was alleged to have organized crime ties. So our job was to surveil people in and about the city of Providence to try and prove this.
Right.
And at the same time, there was my memory escapes me a little bit on this. There was an impeachment committee by the House, right? A House impeachment committee, and then Benjamin Civiletti, who was the United States Attorney, came in for the Civiletti hearings, and all our evidence and photographs and whatnot went.
So one of the things, being at the Journal at the time, there's a picture of the Chief Justice coming out of the Alpine Motel.
Right.
It's not a room he paid for. He came to it regularly.
Right.
Who paid for the room? Did you know that? Did you ever know?
No one paid for the room.
He didn't have to pay for the room.
No, he didn't have to pay for the room.
Now, the thing that Diorio did for you was very important, was placing him with Raymond, right?
Raymond Jr.
Jr.
Yes.
So how did he, tell us about Diorio.
If I recall correctly, in the hearings, they were in the basement of the State House. We brought him in through the back door. He was upset because he didn't have a disguise, and
so he put on a Dolphins hat or something,
yeah, we
right?
put a Dolphins hat on him. He didn't want a disguise, and then on the way in, he wanted one. He testified. The Chief Justice was represented by Richard Egbert from Boston, and it was a difficult time for the Bevilacqua family. It was a difficult time for Rhode Island. It was, this is front page headline news every day. Every day.
But Diorio testified that Junior had a meeting with the Chief Justice, right?
I can't remember his exact testimony, but if I'm not mistaken, it was in a Providence restaurant. He did spot them talking.
Right. And then you put him under witness protection, Moon Diorio, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the one story that's sort of amusing in the book, where his sister wants to talk to him, and he comes back to town, right?
Yes.
Were you there for that?
I was there for that.
So how did that go down?
She was angry, and we met in an undisclosed location, and she was upset with Moon.
For turning?
Yeah, but again, we're going back to an era where that wasn't, that was frowned upon.
Yes.
I mean, she had some family members that had to see some of these people that Moon turned on. So it was a kind of a family thing with why she was angry with him. And she was a very nice lady too, by the way. I'd met her prior to that, but she was angry on this day.
And she put money on the table for him or something?
She gave him she gave him something to go away with, but that was it. I had to bring him to a safe house after that.
And you had to protect him that night, and he became distraught according to the book and everything.
Yeah, he was not doing too well and threatened to potentially kill himself.
Right, and you have a story in there where he's going to say, "You don't have a gun," and you do.
Yeah, exactly. So
not the best night of sleep in your career.
No,
right?
It wasn't. He threatened to take my gun, and he was very emotional. Let's just leave it at that. I tried to calm him down. He's very emotional. I had other detectives outside, and let's just say I made it known to him that wouldn't be a good idea if he ever touched me.
He couldn't have gotten it away from
And
you.
he's still alive, you think?
I can't say.
Oh, yeah.
But he's
Well, of
out there
course.
somewhere, if he's alive.
that's
if
a
he's
good
out
question.
there
I
somewhere,
can't
right?
say.
He can't say. He can't say. But anyway, we'll come back with more with Brendon Doherty when we come back for the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. So please stay tuned.
Cruel Cruelty is not fashionable.
Don't wear fur.
Support the people who fight for animal rights.
Hi, and welcome back to the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. Peter, what were we discussing before?
We were talking about mobsters, but let's talk about the banking crisis.
What year was that?
2001, right?
Around there, yeah.
Yeah. I remember being home one Sunday, and the governor said, you have to come to the basement of the State House. Sheldon Whitehouse is having a press conference, and he's announcing that he's shutting down all the banks.
Yeah.
But leading up to that was a lot of stuff about Central Credit Union and a lot of stuff about Joe Mollicone. So you got into it because Mollicone's business, Heritage Loan and Investment Bank on Atwell's, the building was vandalized, and that caught your attention. So,
It did.
So why?
Well, not just that caught my attention, because you'd have to wonder, was that just a random act?
Yeah.
But the branch on Pocasset Avenue was vandalized just as bad.
Oh, okay.
So
the Silver Lake branch.
Quite a coincidence that both banks were
Right.
destroyed. Windows broken and doors smashed, and yeah. So I called one of my old partners at the Providence Police to see what he thought, and we talked about it. And so I said, well, I'm going to go see Joe Mollicone and see what, because my information was that was a retaliation for to get back at a friend of his,
Louis Minacchio.
Louis Minacchio. So Louis Minacchio was close with Joe Mollicone, as that's the information we had at the time.
You learned it at the time, or did you sort of know that going in?
I knew it. I knew.
So they would be seen together. Maybe
Well, they
one
wouldn't
was
be
an investment,
They
or
wouldn't be seen together too much, because
No?
Louis didn't like to be seen like that. But just from intelligence information, I knew that they were
associated in
connected,
some way.
Associated.
Yeah, yeah. So you went to see
So
Joe.
I went to see Joe, and there were carpenters in there at the time, fixing windows and putting grates on the windows and fixing the doors, and he offered me a muffin.
That's a classic story. He did that to everybody, I guess. Right?
I heard that.
get a muffin.
I heard that later. It was the first time I had ever been offered a muffin in a meeting,
Yeah.
but I was offered a muffin. I didn't.
Said no, thank you.
I refused the muffin. But I had a cordial conversation with Joe. He was a nice guy to talk to. And I remember when I left, I told him, Joe, if he denied any retaliation or having anything to do with any.
Were the storm clouds forming yet at that time about bad loans and a run on banks?
Not that we knew of.
Yeah, nothing out in the public yet.
No,
about
nothing
any of
out in
that.
the
Yeah,
public. So I remember when I got up, I said, Joe, if anyone turns the heat up on you and you want to call somebody, I gave him my card. And I don't think he liked that. He tried to slide the card back like he didn't want it, and I left it there. And I said, have a good day. But he was a gentleman to me. I was a gentleman to him, but I just wanted him to know that, that's a possibility in that world. So I left, and I didn't hear it until later that that card actually came up when he was.
Yeah, but did you know that he had this practice where he was just giving you loans when you just came in? If you were a certain person, you could just come in and he'd give you a loan.
Well,
maybe you write a piece of paper. Did you know about that?
Well, I found out, not at that point, I
Yeah.
didn't, but I found out later what they called the offline loans.
Yes, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was during this period where the place got knocked up, or no, after?
Well, those offline loans had been going on for a while, so
Yeah.
I would assume it was during that period,
Right.
yeah. But there was no connection that I knew of at that point.
Right. Now you have the second meeting at Cafe Verde, right? At Louis Minacchio's restaurant, right? You went to see Louis?
That was later when.
After Joe disappeared.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
Joe disappeared, and Colonel Stone says, Doherty, find Joe Mollicone, basically, right?
Yeah, well, we're mixing up a little bit here because
Okay.
Colonel Stone was the colonel then, but shortly thereafter he retired. Colonel Culhane came in.
Right, okay.
There was a meeting, a private meeting on a holiday. I can't remember which one, but it was Attorney General Jim O'Neill, Bob Craven, myself, and members of RISDIC, and they let us know that Joe Mollicone's missing. There's a problem with the banks. At that point, Jim O'Neill and Bob Craven called a timeout. We went in the hallway, and they realized that maybe we shouldn't be talking to these guys anymore because someone might be. We didn't know if someone there is inculpated in this, so we
Probably they were.
From that point on, we started to look for Joe Malacone. I remember calling his house. I mean, I thought that's the first step to find out if Joe's missing. I asked for him, and whoever answered the phone hung up on me. That's usually not good when you ask for somebody to hang up on you.
You said who you were, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. So, anyways, Joe became learned. We came to learn shortly thereafter that Joe really is missing, and
With money.
and then the investigation.
Well, the
ensued.
bank was empty of money, gone.
The investigation ensued, and then it is what it is. It's history. Joe was a fugitive, and
FBI list.
if I'm not mistaken, he was on the top 10 most wanted.
Because in the meantime, he was viewed as sort of the match that set the Rizdick on fire.
The banking crisis.
Yeah, and people were out $1 billion, and they were in the streets, and so.
Well, and you know, contemporaneous to that point in time, I think it was January 1st, Governor Sunderland closed the banks, right?
Because he had to stop the run.
Correct, because of the run, right?
Yeah. So
because of the anticipated run.
Right. So then you tried to, okay, well, Malacone has something to do with Menacchio. I'm going to go see Menacchio.
Yes, we had a full court press on Joe Malacone's whereabouts, but it wasn't going well, and so I mean we had a powerful underworld figure in right down the street in Louis Menacchio, and I thought I would take a shot to because I thought I'd be criticized later if I never asked that.
Straight up.
Yeah, so I just asked straight up. I went in and asked Louis if
you walk in
a
people
crafty
know who
way.
you are, right?
Oh, he knows exactly who I am.
And the people in the place know who you are.
Yeah, he was a gentleman though. He'd say, "You sure have a seat." And obviously I put this on record that I was going there. I didn't take I didn't often sit and have coffee with.
No, and you had somebody outside watching the thing.
I mean, this is the life I lived. I mean, this is what we did.
Yeah.
And.
That's just the way it was.
That's just the way it was, and I asked him. I said, it'd be a big, it'd be big for me if Joe Malacone was coming home, because there were rumors that he can't stay away too. He loves Rhode Island. He's got to come back and see his family. He loved his family. So I just made it known that it would be big for me if he's made any intentions or any moves to come home. That if he contacts me, we could expedite this. I thought like maybe, if he's thinking about coming home in a year and getting this over and going to trial, maybe if it happens now, that'd be good for the state to get this over with, because it was front page every day, right?
So
that's when Louis Menacchio started playing with the issue.
Yeah. So what did he do?
Yeah, he said, so this means like you want me to tell you, so assuming he's a smart guy.
Yeah. He just like you and Moon Diorio.
Yeah, assuming I know where he is, or assuming I could get a message to him is what he said, because he didn't want to incriminate himself. If I directed him toward you, that's a big feather in your cap. Okay, yes it is. So then he said, okay, so what's in there for me? And now I knew that this was over. It's just a game he was playing. So I said, you got one in the bank. He said, that's when he said, it's in the book. Does that mean I can run crap games upstairs? And I thought that was funny. Yeah. So I thought, one good joke deserves another. I said, no, you can run crap games out in the middle of the street. And he laughed and I laughed. And I remember him saying, hey, you're a good detective. Just keep doing your job. You never get anything here. So we shook hands, and that was it.
Now you guys tried everything. You looked everywhere, inside of everything, except that family line. You missed part of the family line. I remember you telling me this. The sister. You missed.
Yeah, we found out later that he wasn't touched. I think it was his sister. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't remember the names, but whoever it was.
A family member.
A family member. It would have been nice if we.
But she or he regularly
talked to him.
And you knew the phone, and
later.
You knew what phone it was.
You always get these things after the fact,
I know,
right?
You put right.
Yeah, boy.
But in fiction, of course, this stuff can all come together and happen, like in that movie, you know.
Yeah.
But then let's get back to the business card. That's a funny story.
Yeah,
With Mollicone.
I gave Joe my business card way back when.
He's in Salt Lake City or
Yeah,
something?
he was under the name of John Fagioli in Salt Lake City, and he was with an acquaintance and at a bar or a restaurant bar, and I'm told that he took his license. I mean, took his wallet out that he had cleaned everything out of, and somehow my card had stuck to the inside of his wallet, and he took it out and. He obviously told somebody this story. This is how it got to me. He saw my card and ripped it up in little pieces. And Salt Lake City ended up on the floor.
Yeah, what do you have at detectives?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you know, Mollicone was big, but he wasn't really. What would you say, Mollicone and organized crime? How would you describe that relationship?
Oh, I think if you asked Joe, he had nothing to do with organized crime. He was an associate. I mean, listen, there's a guy like Joe Mollicone. I mean, he was at that time he was a legitimate, well-respected member of the community, and yeah, he'd be one day you could see him having lunch with a political figure. The next day, you might see him over on the corner on the side street talking to Louis Minacchio. Or you might see him in church.
What could they have done for each other? Like an organized crime figure and a banker, like.
You know, I don't want to speculate because we were never able to tie that up completely. Maybe the Providence Journal was able to, but
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was just sort of talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, he is. I think, you know, the beginning of this century, he was the #1 figure in everybody's mind because of his associations. Now, I think what happened at Rhode Island Central Credit Union and some of these others, it had a lot more to do with the, you know. But still, he's the name that everybody associates.
Yeah, I mean, but Joe was I mean, when you looked at the major, I don't want to say fundraisers, but charitable organizations. Joe was like
Like giving to everybody.
Yeah, not only giving to everybody, he was a chair, he's a co-chair at these things. He was
involved in everything.
Involved in everything. He was a charismatic guy. I think it just all came tumbling down one day, and he couldn't control it.
Yeah.
Well, to conclude the third segment, so we'll be taking a break, and don't forget to come back for the fourth and final segment of the Tommy Rocket Show with Peter Phipps and Brendon Doherty.
Hi, I'm Joe Perry. And Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, here for Red. Recording artists, actors, and athletes against drunk driving. Never let someone you know get behind the wheel if they've been drinking. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
And welcome back to the fourth and final segment. Peter Phipps, Brendon Doherty. Tell me where we left off, Peter.
Well, we were talking about Joe Mollicone and Wise Guys, but I was, when I was reading the book, I mean, there's pictures, there's parts of you're in the weeds looking in at a gambling operation. I mean, there's scary guys, you know, Bobo and all those, they're scary guys. And I kept wondering, did it bother you, you know? And you tell a story about, we met on Reservoir Avenue at your barber shop, which is a classic. So Gerard Ouimette was a bad guy.
Yes, he was a bad guy.
And but like you used to go to Federal Hill, you'd get your hair cut on Reservoir Avenue in Cranston there.
Not in uniform, though.
No.
So tell us that story about that day when we met.
Yeah. Well, but before I do that, I mean, we are talking about bad guys. These are bad guys. I understood them. I understood the structure of organized crime. I understood who the real guys were and who the frauds were, who was trying to impress the core group of La Cosa Nostra members. I understood what it was like what it took to get made, to become an inducted member of La Cosa Nostra. And then there was some wannabe guys, what I would call wannabe guys, or I actually label them double-A players, and I'd actually joke with some guys, even these white guys, and say, "You're a double-A player. You're trying to get to the majors. You ought to find another profession before something bad happens to you." Because a lot of these guys, they end up in jail or in a graveyard at a young age. But so one of the worst, not worst, but one of the most dangerous guys out there in the last 30, 40 years was Gerard Ouimette. Gerard Ouimette was a close associate of Raymond Patriarca Sr. and Jr., and he had his own faction, and he was very loyal to the old man, to Raymond Patriarca. So, a lot of people that don't understand this lifestyle, this world, would think, well, why didn't he make a move at Raymond? He couldn't make a move on Raymond. He just couldn't. Raymond's the boss, make no mistake about it. Raymond Patriarca Sr. was the boss of New England back then, barring none. Boston was subservient to him. Even the Winter Hill Gang wouldn't come to Rhode Island without being invited.
But Ouimette, was he made?
He couldn't be made because he's French and Irish,
Ah.
and to be an inducted member of La Cosa Nostra, you need to be of Italo-American descent.
But
so,
that didn't matter, huh? With Raymond?
No, he would not violate the rules.
Yeah.
No.
No. I mean, but as far as Raymond's perspective, it didn't matter that he.
It didn't matter that he couldn't be
Ouimette
made.
was not
Italian. Because see in the mob, you need muscle guys like Ouimette. You need earners. There's guys out there that wouldn't hurt a flea, but they can make a lot of money. They're buying and selling stolen goods. They're selling things. Raymond didn't want drugs, but they're selling stolen goods. The cars, back then the cars were big with the odometers and insurance frauds and whatnot. Earners, it didn't matter what nationality that guy was. If he could earn money for Raymond, he liked it. If he needed to do somebody, needed to get him done, Gerard Ouimette was known to be one of those guys that.
So that's what he did. That's what Ouimette did.
Well, Raymond allowed him to earn too.
Yeah.
Ouimette could do truck hijackings and whatnot. So he needed to earn. He needed to pay his bills. But make no mistake about it. If Raymond wanted something done, he'd call Gerard, and one of Gerard's right-hand men. Well, he had two brothers too that were in the same business, but he also had Jerry Tillinghast. So I mean, that was a faction. In my opinion, that faction was stronger than the South Boston faction.
Oh. The Tillinghast Ouimette group. So the day we're talking about, you're getting your hair cut at the Razor's Edge?
Yes, good memory. The Razor's Edge. That was Salvatore Pazienza, a friend of mine. He's the uncle of five-time world champion Vinny Pazienza.
Cranston, 100% Cranston we're talking about
boxing
here.
stuff all over the walls, and picture from when I was fighting when I was a kid in there, and just kind of a cool place to be, right? It brought back a lot of memories. I'd get my hair cut in there. This one day, Gerard Ouimette had just gotten out. I had arrested his brother Johnny and his brother Freddie a year before, and you have to know this guy. I mean, he was larger than life, and he's in prison, and he's getting out, and the word on the street is Gerard's getting out. Okay, so what did that mean? If you had a problem with him before, you got a problem with him now.
He's coming after you.
Yeah, if you owed him money, well, that's coming with interest. It's just the way it was. So.
And did that also mean he was looking for you?
Oh, no, he would only look for me because he wanted to see what I look like, because I've taken out too many of his guys.
Oh.
Johnny Jeremiah, Johnny Ouimette, Freddie Ouimette, Tommy Firth. I've taken out too many of his guys. So he must be in prison hearing this. Who did that? Brendon Doherty. So he needed to know who Brendon Doherty was. And plus he wanted to show Brendon Doherty, I guess he was a tough guy or something.
So there you are at the barbershop.
Yeah, so on my way in, I saw Johnny Jeremiah on the corner. And I also know Jerry Ouimette just secured an office in a building across the street, which I thought was kind of stupid since he knows I get my hair cut in there. So Johnny Jeremiah was on the corner, and he looked at me and he nodded and he said, "Hello, Brendon." I said, "Hey, Johnny," and I went into the barbershop. And I said to Sal, "Let me see, I want to be situated in the mirror because I want to see what's going on out there. I don't know why Jeremiah's out there." So he put the sheet on, and all of a sudden the car pulled up. I think it had New Jersey or New York plates. A couple of guys get out, and Johnny Jeremiah called. I spotted him right away. It's Gerard Ouimette. And he whispered to him, and he looked into the barbershop. He must have just said Brendon Doherty went in the barbershop, so we'll be careful. But that's not the way Gerard thinks. Be careful. A lot of guys would maybe get out of the way so Brendon Doherty doesn't see you, No, Gerard wanted to go into the lion's den and face me. So I saw him coming in. I said, all right, listen, Sal, he's coming in here. Now, Sal knew him. They grew up in the same neighborhood. He wanted nothing to do with this conversation. I said, Sal, I don't want my back to that door. Pull me around. And so I'm facing the door. He did. Ouimette came in, started to look around. He said, this is a nice barber shop. This is a very, very nice barber shop.
And wait a minute, can I interrupt? And you knew?
Yeah, I mean, I was armed, and you never know if Gerard is. I didn't think I had a problem with him at that level where he's going to come in shooting, but if he did, that's fine too. So I would just feel bad for Sal. I wouldn't want poor Sal in the way.
Poor barber.
Yeah. So I mean, it was real. Here's a guy that's friends with John Gotti. I knew that. I knew the close relationship he had with the Gambino crime family in New York, and he sat at the right hand of Raymond Sr. and Junior. And he just made these weird observations about the place. And
That's a scene from a movie.
Yeah. I said something to the effect of, Gerard, is there something you need to say to me? And he just stared at me. And it was you gotta give him credit, it was a pretty good stare. Would have scared a lot of people, it didn't scare me. And I don't mean to sound like a tough guy, I just grew up in this environment. I'm not afraid of Gerard Ouimette, believe me. But I mean, he was a real deal, and he just said, goodbye, my friend. And I said something like, you just wanted to see me, right? And he just nodded, and that was it. It was a weird encounter.
How did he know you were in there?
Johnny Jeremiah told him.
Oh, that's
from the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny's a good lookout.
Yeah, and that's what he was doing there anyway, probably, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Wow. So that brings up this issue of, how it's a dangerous business.
Sure.
And it's almost like the AA players are more of a risk than the other guys.
Yeah, because I always thought that, because those are guys that need to quickly make a name for themselves. And there was a guy, he's in the book, his name is Dennis Wilmot. He got shot 31 times. He lived. He was trying to make a name for himself, giving beatings out and whatnot. Who knows if a guy like that got the order from above? Who knows to what extent he would have taken.
Yeah, and then there's a sense that they knew you weren't going to pull something sneaky on them, right? So you had a sense with the guys that you were straight, in the sense that I'm out to get you, but I'm not going to make up evidence to get you.
I used to make that very clear, because I remember Andrew Menacchio, Louis' brother, saying that to me one time. Don't ever set me up or something like that. I didn't know what he meant. I said, what do you mean set you up? Well, that's what cops could do years ago. They could set you up. I said, I will never set you up. If I can't do something legally, you'll never see me setting anyone up. And that got around, and I think it's important. It got around to the wise guys. I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't even know how to explain it, but to have that street respect from wise guys, knowing that you wouldn't lie, you're not going to compromise your values or compromise a case or then end up in court telling that story, then you're respected by them.
Right. But the AA players, and there were a couple instances you talk about in the book, they sort of made those things where you started to worry about your family a little bit.
Yeah, I had a couple of tacitly implied threats. I used to just ignore it, but there was one that I thought, kind of hit home, because they let me know they knew what kind of dog I had. You had to know me to know what kind of. I had a Belgian Shepherd, an all-white Shepherd, and a guy on the street said, "How's the white Shepherd doing?"
Yeah, and that means they're watching.
They're driving by your house?
Well, I don't know if they're driving by, because sometimes they just get information from somebody. Oh yeah, I know Brendon. He's got a beautiful white Shepherd or something.
We want to pretend.
And so they'll use that intelligence to.
Intimidate you.
But I just didn't get intimidated. But I had a family that meant more to me than. Put it this way: I'd do whatever I had to do to protect my family.
Yeah. Now, so we're talking about this in the past, because the mafia is the past, right?
Yeah.
So where did they go? Why?
Well,
what happened?
I'm proud here, and it all happened. It wasn't planned this way, but I think, look, you had the Baldrick gang on the run in Boston. Mass State Police did a great job with that.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, you had the bug in 98 Prince Street and Gennaro and Jewel's office, and you had new statutes coming out. RICO. We That RICO statute, we were able to use that. That's why when I said we would be on a surveillance and we'd put 4 or 5 guys together, because the act of one is the act of another in a conspiracy, and some of those guys didn't want to be seen together because we could prove that yes, yes, and Frank does know Joe because here they are in this picture.
Right, and there's the organizer, the criminal organization, and then the state took over the business.
Yes,
right?
True.
I mean, it's
true.
unbelievable, right?
It is true that but back then when I first started, there was a numbers game. There was a numbers game. Bookmaking was huge, right?
Yeah.
Marijuana was huge with the wise guys because they didn't want to get in. Most of them, not all. Some of them didn't want to get into cocaine because the penalties would bring you to federal court and they were too high. Right. So some of these guys would be under 50 pounds of marijuana. So I arrested many guys for bookmaking and dealing with marijuana. Now both of them are legal.
And you sent them to jail.
I know.
And you sent them
Who
to
would
jail.
have
I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
No,
Who would have thought that?
No, I don't. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, so the state took over, takes the money now. They get the VIG.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's, as they say, right?
Yeah, it's just the way it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that we've come to the end because there seems that there's so much more we could have talked about, and I want to thank you so much for being such a great guest.
Thank you.
I'm sure the state of Rhode Island and the audience is very happy that you chose this topic and that it came out so well. And I want to tell the audience, don't forget to take a look at Brendon's book, It's Just the Way It Was, and to thank you once again for being a guest on the Tommy Rocket Show.
Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much for your research, and I thought everything was wonderful. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next Tommy Rocket Show.